Hey, this is Yulia Sion, a researcher in mediated touch technology, and as always, I will host episodes on haptics. And today we will talk about mid-air haptics and what it takes to create touch in the air. My guest today is Dario Pittera. He's a behavioral research scientist from Ultraleap, which is located in UK. Ultraleap is a company that develops groundbreaking haptic technology that uses ultrasound waves to create tactile sensations in mid-air. Hi, Dario. Thanks Hi. Thanks for chatting with me today and finding this time. And how are you? How is your day?
Yeah. All good, all good. Summer is coming also in the UK.
So you are based in UK, right?
Yes.
Okay, so good it's coming there too, because I'm also in the north, so we have a sunny weather as well now. Obviously, I prepared for this podcast. I kind of, learned about you, like everything I could find. So there was a research about you done. And I was really impressed with your website, actually, and the way you visualized your resume, your CV. Like really awesome. I'm going to probably take some tips from you and to improve my own. And you have lots of interesting backgrounds. And by the way, this is like a compliment. Amazing that you put all your positions there, like from early jobs, like a waiter, or like, I think you were working also in a warehouse initially, like long time ago, right? Like a student. So this is really amazing, because usually people don't put such positions in there, like, when they're in advanced kind of careers already, like in a totally different field. But I thought it's so amazing because you are in UX, right? Like user experience design, especially haptics now, right? And all these like small jobs, they're actually very helpful, actually, I think. Maybe you can tell me later, like to understand like new use cases, maybe. So I thought it was really awesome. And
I think it's nice to put everything into perspective, because all the experiences that you do, it might add a piece to the story. Even when you do the waitress, if you think about UX, then maybe you start collecting information on how people behave or expect the experience of a dinner might go. You start to studying them to know what is the way to provide the best experience.
And so like my question is, like, so you are in your bachelor's, you did neuroscience, right? Like you are also so let me see, and your MS was in clinical psychology, developmental psychology, and neuropsychology, right? So you're basically in a neuroscience, right? In a broader area. So the question is, how did you jump from neuropsychology to haptics? Like, what was the move there? Maybe you could give us a bit more information.
So as you said, my degree is in psychology with a specialization in neuropsychology. So I started in a hospital doing cognitive assessment, rehabilitation, and it was a very interesting job, because you have the opportunity to interface with the elderly. They are telling you their stories, how the life was at their age and so on. But it was also very emotionally demanding. So I needed a change. And also in Italy, you need 1 year of practice after the 3+2 degree in psychology in 2 branches of psychology. So I did the clinical one, and I wanted to do something more hands-on, more experimental. So I had a past as a web developer, web design. I always like to play a bit with code. I did my thesis in touch and VR, but I never had the chance to put my hands on to the devices. So I was just thinking to do an experience with haptic technology, and I ended up in the University of Birmingham under Massimiliano Di Luca. They were doing lots of VR haptics. I still remember our call. He was asking me what I knew about Unity, and I was virtual reality. So there was lots of willingness to do it, but not actual experience. So I started like that, just to try out and complete my year of practice. And then after 1 year, I put my hands on the Novin Falcon, doing my first teleoperations, and then the Delta Force device, so that I could, learning a bit of how the haptics work. And 1 year went by, and I find myself more and more passionate about haptics, and I applied for my PhD at the University of Sussex under Marianne Obrist, and she was studying this middle haptics technology. It was very new at the beginning, at that time. And she was mixing this concept of sense of embodiment and illusions, emotions. So I thought it was perfect because I could mix my background in psychology and the passion for technology together. And now it's been 8 years that I'm doing haptics.
I see. You mentioned you became, at some point, you became passionate about haptics, right? Or sense of touch in a sense way. Why is that? What did you see so special about touch?
But for me, it was this ability to go beyond what you see, because it's nice to see something that is photorealistic, but then the first thing that I have in my mind is to touch it, just to make it believable. No, even when I do some shopping for clothes, the first thing that you want to do is to touch the texture, to have in mind how it feels on you and so on. So when I was using this force feedback device, it was kind of impressing, that you could, there was this elastic slab of material, and I could feel the compliance, I could feel the elasticity of it. So it was just natural. It was feeling quite good, and I wanted to do more with that, because for me, I was coming from a purely clinical background, so everything was very exciting and new. So,
I see. So, well, okay. So you mentioned you worked in, as I understand, or like experienced force feedback. So am I correct to assume you also been exposed to other type of haptic feedback in addition to mid-air?
Yeah. I started with these force feedback devices. As I cited before, there was this more game level device like the Novin Falcon that was very simple, and then the Delta Force Dimension, I don't remember now the name of the brand, but this robotic arm, which is it has a strong motor to provide tactile force feedback. So yeah, I start with those actually, also to learn a bit the ropes, how to program, how this sensation works, but yeah.
Got it. And so now, at what point of how long ago did you transition to mid-air haptics? And maybe since we are moving now into like mid-air haptics, because it's, I would say it's somewhat very different from in a way it's represented, right, to a user, and more likely in terms of sensations. I honestly never worked with mid-air haptics, but I have a kind of feeling that in terms of sensations also has certain like advantages and probably also limitations in comparison to other types of feedback. So maybe you could talk a bit about mid-air haptics, what it is, limitations and advantages in comparison to other types of feedback. And my follow-up question will be also about like any behavioral or psychophysical aspects when it comes to mid-air haptics in comparison to other types of feedback.
Yeah, so the first time that I tried mid-air haptics was now 7 years ago, more or less, when I transitioned to mid-air haptics. And when I tried it, is this technology that you don't see, but through these ultrasound speakers, you can actually make a sensation that you can feel on your hands without entering in contact with anything. So for me, the fascinating stuff was that, which links to the advantages, is that you don't need any to be tethered, any to wear any device to hold anything in your hand. So the technology is potentially transparent, right? Because you could implement it in your chair, in your car, in a museum. You just put the hands onto the device and it's working. And it's also silent because we are using ultrasounds. But if you want, you could make some sound coming out from the device. So you could have at the same time haptics and sound, and this opens up also opportunities for multisensory interactions. And to top that up, if you want, you could also make levitating stuff, and all of three together. So for example, so we did this ultra button, which is a button in midair that you don't see, but you can touch. So it is also hygienic, especially if you think about the recent pandemic. But in general, I'm more on the germaphobe side of things, so I don't like to touch, touch things in public and so on. So there is also this advantage of midair haptics. So so this had a huge potential, especially for me at the beginning as a PhD student. I wanted to explore the different kind of frequencies, modulations that you could use to make the haptics real, let's say.
Yeah, and if you talk about like perceptual aspects of mid-air haptics, are they different from the actual like touch perception or versus like vibrotactile touch perception, and how they're different, if they are?
Yeah, so during the different studies, I realized that there are similarities and differences. So, for example, we don't have a well-defined contactor. Usually, when you have a haptics device, you might have something in contact with your skin, which is very precise. In our case, we have a focal point. We call focal point is area of maximum pressure that actually indent your skin and makes the percept. So you have this, you can imagine like in a 2D, a circle. At the center, you have something that is more high pressure, and then some sort of shading on the boundaries, for example. So at this point, you start thinking when is, and also the focal point is quite a complex phenomena. So you have this acoustic pressure, but also acoustic streaming, so a bit of wind, if you want. So when is that you start to feeling the vibration? When is that you start feeling the air? When is that you feel 2 points instead of 1? Can you use perceptual illusions, for example, or how do temporal and spatial summation effect on the skin works? So there are all of these questions. Some of them we already answered. Like, I don't know if I have to talk about psychophysical aspects, are exactly these differences in the focal point. So it's,
yeah, you can mention that. Why not? That would be interesting. Like, for example, like you mentioned about illusions, right? Are they the same? Can we achieve the same illusions, tactile illusions that we are usually having, like in real touch, for instance? I don't know, with rabbit illusion or anything else.
Yeah, indeed. So just last week, we published this paper where I studied this apparent tactile motion. So at this point, we have just 2 points, static, and activating them in a timely fashion, you can feel a sensation of moving, going from one point to another one. So we know that apparent tactile motion can be successfully stimulated with midair haptics. But as you said, there are also rabbit illusion funneling that we could exploit, for example. Or maybe going a bit backwards in time, we discovered that we can also stimulate the hairy skin. So now, instead of doing just discriminative touch, we might move towards social or affective touch. So because we can exploit this phenomenon of acoustic streaming, so you can feel it on the airs as well. So yeah.
Can you give an example, like of use cases for this social touch? That would be interesting, I think, to like talk from more of a practical like point of view, like everyday life. Like, can you give some examples?
Well, in my studies, I just studied the phenomenon by itself. But if I have to say, maybe it could be occasions where people are at distance because, I don't know, they are in the hospital. I still remember like this patient that some nurse put these gloves filled with warm water just to give this sensation of touch that many of us missed at that time. So if you have our technology, for example, you could put it near the arm of a person and then be in contact with them and kind of provide a caress, for example. Or if you are meditating, you could do an application that is sending you affective vibrations on the skin so that you can relax yourself and increase your well-being. If I have
can you do that with mid-air haptics? Can you affect like emotional state or like achieve certain emotional response from humans?
Yeah, we are at the beginning. So we just studied that you can stimulate the airy skin. So stimulating the airy skin, it means you will stimulate all of these afferent tactile cues that you can actually use for affective touch. How to modulate them? Maybe is not yet clear. So we need to do more studies. Maybe we need also to change a bit of contextual variables, because of course, if you know that it's your partner sending the stimulation, you might feel it in a more pleasant way or not. If it is a robot or a stranger, of course, you will behave differently. But potentially, yes, we could influence your, influence. Probably we can give some affective sensations, also modulating the speed of the focal point on your speed. We know that these fibers that decodes the affective touch might move at 3 centimeters per second. They are more sensitive at 3 centimeters per second. So if you modulate the speed in a right way, you might influence them. From our results, participants were feeling pleasant sensations. So in a way, it was always pleasant. So we need maybe to find a way to make it unpleasant, just to have this dichotomy. But for now, it was pleasant. But we never studied something more, long-term, to see if there are effects on well-being and so on.
I see. And so the parameters you work with are similar to, let's say, vibratactile feedback, like you see sort of frequency, like amplitude, duration, and location on the body, right? Or like rhythmic aspects, same stuff.
We have the frequency, intensity, location on the body, as you said, and the modulation type, because you could, for example, just play with amplitude modulation. So you go forward from 0 to maximum intensity on and off, and you can feel a sensation of vibration. You have spatiotemporal modulation, so it's a point that it's moving quickly in a circle, and then you are stimulating another kind of sensation, but more or less they are vibrations that we are working with.
So the basics for these designs you basically take from the original kind of knowledge, right, of how to design haptics, right? From, I don't know, what are your like foundational studies that you use?
Yeah, sometimes
to design your experiments.
Yeah, you take studies from the literature depending on what you want to achieve. In the last paper, I was saying we use apparent tactile motion, so you have all of these references to the first illusion that was studied, or affective touch. You have big papers on the kind of affective touch that the parameters that you have to use, what intensity, what speed, as I was saying. So you sometimes draw from the literature and you expand that, or you try to replicate the results with our technology, because you don't know if it's still working. Many times it does. So yeah, we might have different parameters, but in the end there are similarities.
Got it. So you mentioned a very important thing, and for haptics, it's like it's a context, right? It's so important. Who is touching, right? And then which circumstances. So, and this is somehow related. It's not somehow, it is related to design of your studies, right? So that's what I want to talk a bit more about, because as I understand in your like daily work activities, you conduct all kinds of psychophysical studies, right? Like experiments and maybe like user experience studies. I don't know, maybe in semi-controlled environments. Maybe you can tell me more about like type of studies you conduct. Maybe perhaps you can also mention what kind of tactile effects you study, right? Or design for those studies, right? Please.
Yeah, so as you said, I do lots of studies with humans, but I would differentiate them in two branches. The first one is the perceptual studies, when I need to focus on characterizing the haptics output. So I need to know what is the frequency or intensity that we need to feel this or that sensation. So I will use strictly controlled psychophysical studies that are with lots of repetition, so that we have high power effect, and then we can say with a certain amount of safety that you have to use this and that to make the haptic perceivable. And then there is the other branch that is more on the qualitative side, like UX, and then I would use some surveys, questionnaires, usability testing. But sometimes I need to mix the two of them, because psychophysical studies, they give you access to the observed behavior, and that's good, but then you don't have access to what's really happening on a higher level into the human brain. For example, there are a series of cross-modal correspondences, which are these effects for which maybe you feel like high-pitched sound is coming from a small object, no? So there are all of these high cognitive factors that influence top-down your perception. So top, because it's in your experience, your prior about the world, will influence how the percept is finally perceived. So if I have to give you an example, if you want to study the strength of the perceived strength of our haptics, no, and you start modulating with frequency, then for someone the low frequency might be perceived as the strongest one, because they will feel like something like tum tum tum, that feels like a hammer. But for someone else, you will have high frequencies as the stronger ones, because this ta 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 might feel, for whatever reason, the stronger one. So psychophysically, what you have is a data that is saying the opposite thing. So the low and the high frequency is the strongest one. And then you cannot understand what's happening in your data. So if you add some qualitative measures, then you might be able to disentangle this mess in your data and finally understand that, okay, it might happen because some of us feel high frequency in a way and low frequency in another. So I think that while quantitative studies are really important, because you can go to your stakeholders and public and saying, we tested this, it's working, then you need also some qualitative measures to really understand what's going on at a higher level. So yeah. And again, if I need to study high level complex interactions, then I might use something more UX. Once the psychophysics is out of the game, no? With the psychophysics, I tell you, use this frequency, use this intensity, because for sure the user will feel it. But then you mix them up to create something, and then I will have to use something else to say, maybe if the feedback that I coded is making sense for the user, if the position where they have to interact might be tiring for the arm and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a bit less on the designing effects of the haptics, but if I have to cite something, it might be again this hairy skin effect, because that is a nice example of serendipity. For example, I was studying the distance between the focal point and the skin. Usually the focal point has to be on the skin to indent it and make you perceive something. But then I was using a meter that had 3 centimeters. I didn't account for. So my focal point was a distance from my skin, and I could feel this stream of air that was actually making the sensation perceivable on the hairy skin. At that point, I characterize a bit the output, so that if I was going farther from the skin, I would feel it stronger. But also at some point, I was modulating the temperature that of the stimulus, because it's wind, basically. And then you try to find this balance between perceived strength and temperature to provide the sensation that it's the most pleasant possible, for example. And recently, I was just citing that some colleagues at Ultraleap coded also a tool which is kind of useful for prototyping fastly special tactile patterns. And now, instead of coding, you have an interface. You can put all your points in succession, and then play with intensity, the timing of it, and then you might be able
like a visual interface, right?
Yes, exactly, to prototype more easily. But yeah.
So you do a lot of experiments, right? But I wonder how all these psychophysical experiments, how far are they from reality, in a way that if you look at the visual modalities, right, or audio modalities, right, we know a lot of things about those, right? We have like golden rules and design guidelines. But when it comes to haptics, it's somewhat a fuzzy field in many ways, right? Even if you like read those academic papers on haptics, even there, people don't have like common, vocabulary or ways to describe touch. Even like they use different words for the same thing, and there is no like golden rules seems like, right? What is your opinion on that? Can we achieve certain standards in terms of like design process for haptics, or it's not actually possible because there are so many parameters out there? Even like if you think about our body, right?
No, I mean, indeed, as you said, is very complex. What we call the sense of touch is in reality a multifaceted system. We have discriminated touch, affective touch, nociception, thermal perception. So all of these are subsystems of what we call sense of touch. So for touch, it's harder to find common ground and an organization of all the knowledge we gather. But I think there are already some examples on putting together something in industry. There is this Haptics Industry Forum that is trying to create standards and recommended practices for haptic designers. In our company, well, our founder and co-founders are the pioneering in meter haptics. And now in our group, the haptic perception team, we are trying to find a way to collect all the knowledge accumulated in the years to provide some guidelines. But there are also other examples out there, like Haptipedia, that is trying to putting together a list of the haptics devices out there. Haptiverse, a platform where you can share all the, some of the haptic sensation that we can create. Learninghaptics.org, that is telling you a bit of background of basics of touch, how you do it, how you perceive it, how you measure it, and also in that kind of videos you can find also something about this, about the shareability of knowledge. So they make a list of some of the platforms that are out there. There is also Vitals, which collect all these vibrational patterns, catalog it.
That is fun.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's really we are there with standards and so on, because it's super complex, and all these, you could make an encyclopedia of all of these subsystems, but then they also interact with each other. So if I have to be honest now, I don't think there is something very structured or probably not even close to it. But there are attempts, at least. Yeah.
So it's work in progress.
yeah.
It seems like by the way, I probably need to ask you to send me later all this list of
no
sources on haptics. That would be great for everyone to actually know it, right? Because it's always okay, you start looking everywhere and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So there is another thing that I came across very recently. It's statistics on haptics, which says that, some market researchers, they project that haptic industry will grow to 23 billion within the next few years. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this projection, and what are the main challenges and opportunities you see for the haptic industry?
Yeah, well, I think that shows the momentum that the haptics world is gaining, and the increased interest in the world of haptics. If you think about it, haptics are already widespread and used by a variety of industries. We can think about wearables, game controllers, phones, sex toys, simulations, automotive, VR. In VR, there are Haptics, Sense Globe, Tesla suits, to give just some examples. So I think it's nice that those examples, because at the beginning VR was all about graphical realism to make it nicer, visually. But now we understood that touching is believing. So I remember when I was playing with the DK1 of Oculus many years ago, they had this demo of the castle of cards, and I was just trying to hit them to make them collapse. But first, I didn't have any body or hand tracking. So when I was looking down at my body, there was nothing. And then even if you have it, if there is no interaction between your intent to make an action on the environment and the answer from the environment, then you lose this sense of presence. So I think it's nice that now we are shifting towards integrating the haptics. One of the challenges I would say is that, as I said before, haptics is a very complex sense. So in that regards, I don't know any technology that now can stimulate effectively all of the subcategory of touch. So maybe the future will be something where we use more than one devices at the same time to provide something that comes up alive. So and as you said before, also the lack of haptic vocabulary that might limit a bit the way we expand our research, because we don't have common words between different platforms or haptic devices, who is using force, who is using vibrations, and even in affective touch, you might say pleasant and unpleasant, but it doesn't really mean much. Now, what is pleasant for you might be unpleasant for me, and vice versa.
Exactly.
So, I mean,
but if you think about it, it's the potential is so rich, right? Like
yes.
Even within those planes of being something pleasant or unpleasant, right? It's a spectrum, and this spectrum consists of so many different nuances in between, right? And you mentioned, I like that phrase, you said touching is believing. And then you started talking about VR, which, yes, VR is like the most, I would say, like known use case for haptics. Like it's a more complex use case for haptics beyond like simple notifications on the phones, which all of us have. But is there something more kind of outside of entertainment area, right? Is there something more serious or like romantic in a way, like save the world type of thing, place for haptics in this world? Like, what is your dream vision for haptics?
Yeah,
your persona.
One more fake and sci-fi. There is links to when I saw the TMS machine at the university, this transcranial magnetic stimulation. Basically, is a coil, it's electromagnetic coil. You pass it around the scalp, and then you can deactivate or change the brain activity so that people will move the hands, for example, or the feet. So I was thinking maybe to bypass all these black box of nerves and how the signal is integrated, and then just stimulate the brain so that you put a helmet, and then you have this kind of sensation just delivered into the brain. I don't know if this is something that we want or something that is feasible, honestly, but on a deeper level, I'm a human scientist, so I still like the real thing. I remember when I was younger, maybe because I was younger, maybe because I was in Italy, there was much more touch involved in my life with my friends. I was feeling connected, and now I don't know. I think I started to lose a bit this aspect. And if I have to think about really a future when there is this metaverse where we are connected but at distance, I would like that maybe hapticians might break this limit between the digital and the physical world, so that we can find again this sense of belonging or connection between people. Because I like technology, but at the same time I fear it a bit. I feel like we are losing a bit the real world. Then there is also this discussion, what is real, what is not, because if you are touching me through a technology, okay, there is a medium, but still it should be real, right? So I don't know.
It's amazing. You have like very, very similar views on that. I mean, I have the similar views with yours, because it's about like connecting people, right? Like I feel like touch has this power, which is like unpacked yet, like the mediated touch. I mean, the real touch has this power, but not the mediated touch yet. This affective side, right? Being able to communicate emotions in a very quick, intuitive way, right? We don't need to think even, like we understand exactly what happens when someone touches us, right? Like the intention, the meaning behind it, and also it affects our emotional state. But I guess we are still far in terms of mediated touch to achieve that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we are still far in a way. In the world of technology, there is lots of hype just for these advancements without really thinking about a real issue. I think that in our company we try to have this in mind, to have a real application when we do stuff, because otherwise we just go around poking at the possibility of doing something that it feels great, but maybe there is not a real solution of a real problem behind. So I think, yes, we are a bit far from that, because mainly we unlock new potential, new technologies, and we just use it because we can, without stopping a bit, thinking what's really important. Something that it might be happening already in other fields, like now there is this AI, every day there is something coming up. Of course, sometimes there are really useful technologies, some other times they are suspicious because yes, you can do it, but then is this really needed? I don't know. So I think it would be helpful if every one of us would just stop and thinking about real issues and find a solution to that. And affective touch might be something like that. No, as I said before, you might think about people at distance, you need connection during the war, or because you're in a hospital, or for whatever reason, or maybe there is an unhygienic situations and then you need to find a solution. So yeah, I would like to go in that direction, to keep that in mind, instead of doing something that is wow effect, but then it just, consume itself for what it is. It's wow, but then.
Right, right. Well, this is great. I think we should stop here on this note, which I would like to highlight as solve real issues.
Yes.
I think this should be the slogan for all the technologies.
Yes,
actually.
Completely
So
agree.
Thank you for these insights,
Thank you.
and thank you for your experience, for sharing your experience and your opinions. Really
Thank you
appreciate
very much for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.